Writings reading series. A couple things before we start. If you have a cell phone, would you make sure that it is turned off? Following the reading, Richard Garcia would be happy to take any questions that you might have, and then we'll have some signing tonight. He received an MFA in creative writing from Warren Wilson College and has won numerous awards, including a Pushcart Prize, the Cohen Award from the literary journal Plowshares, and awards from the Georgetown Review and the Greensboro Review. He's also been awarded an Artist Fellowship from the National Endowment for the Arts and received multiple grants for his work as poet in residence at the Long Beach Museum of Art. For 12 years, he was a poet in residence at Children's Hospital in Los Angeles, where he conducted workshops in poetry and art for hospitalized children. Currently, he teaches in the Antioch University Los Angeles MFA program and the Idlewild Summer Poetry program, and lives on James Island in South Carolina. In wide-ranging forms, from pantoum to prose poem, Richard Garcia shows us again and again how easily the real slips into the surreal. It's often narrative poems, the spiraling double helix of dream and waking. Just a quick survey of poem titles suggests the unusual imaginative territory of this work we are about to enter. Furry Lewis drops in on Surrealism 101. Ponce de Leon and the 10 Milkshakes. Richard Garcia steals a poem. Adam and Eve's Dog. Allegory of the Speed Bump. And Not Bad for Hermaphrodite. Sharply imagined images swim out of the weirdness we live in. Our world, he reminds us, or even our sky, covers us with its soft blue fabric of illusion. One such image, the nightlight shining on the speaker's father's false teeth in one poem, is a spelunker's flashlight in an underwater cave, illuminating the fossilized tooth beak of a fierce bird now extinct. In scenarios and images, both bizarre and exactly right, in reimagining the mundane of our daily lives, Richard Garcia remembers us anew to our present and to our past. This is a generative disorientation, one that reorients us, awakening us to the ghost and shimmer of the simplest objects, of the simplest facts of our lives, to all the wild possibilities. Please welcome Richard Garcia.
Well, thanks for that nice introduction. Made me feel like reading me. This guy's pretty good. Well, I just put this together because I just got my luggage. But I'd recommend it to lose your luggage, because when it finally arrives, there's this wonderful moment. Like you feel like running towards it in slow motion. I start out with a poem I wrote some years ago. At the time I just started writing after a long period of not writing. And you know how people collect things like little frogs and stuff? You know, I had this girlfriend, she used to collect chickens. And she had never seen anything I'd written, so I came over one night, high hopes. And she said, show me something you've written. So I was working on this, so I read it to her. And she threw me out. It's called Chickens Everywhere. You can't escape chickens. Chickens are all the rage. Alone in your car, you turn on the radio. It's the chickens. singing Glenn Miller's In the Mood. Even in your sleep, there's no escape. You dream of a woman. She comes towards you, opening her bathrobe. Between her legs, a chicken peeks out. You are in the yard staring at your chicken. Your chicken is staring at you. Your chicken grows until it is 6 feet tall. You embrace. Never have you felt pleasure like this. You wake straddling your pillow. You go to see your lady friend. She is wearing feathers. She moves her neck from side to side and clucks. It's no use. Walk alone in the night. Keep your collar up and your head down. The night is a chicken with enormous black wings. And you, little one, are a grain of wheat on the floor of a barn. I don't know what her problem was. I kind of combine, to me, poetry is memory and imagination. And sometimes the things that seem more imaginative are more literal in my poems. And one of the themes of my poems in both of these books, Rancho and Persistence, is film noir. I like film noir a lot. So some of my poems have the titles of film noir movies, although I may not have actually seen them. And then they're blended in with autobiography. And I guess this came, I used to, I guess I had a crush on this friend, and we used to work together, and she was driving me crazy. It's called Naked City. She was the kind of gal who would look elegant even if she was wearing nothing but handcuffs. She had a way of leaning against the wall in an alley that made you think she was wearing a gold lame evening gown, balancing an onyx cigarette holder on her fingertips while a diamond bracelet flashed from her wrist. When she sat on a bench in the station house doing her nails, humming to herself, I set aside a prayer that she would not raise her skirt to adjust her stockings. If she did, I'd have to think about baseball, which I despised, or the locations of seemingly unrelated homicides forming the crude calligraphy of her name on a map. By now you've guessed that I was nothing to her, an omniscient voiceover narrator watching her sashay in and out of trouble in 100 different locations. What was that stupid tune she always hummed? It was 1, 2, 3, the conga. The same one I found myself humming after I brought her in for questioning and got nowhere. It was 1, 2, 3, the conga, stuck in my head as I stood in the interrogation room alone, rubbing lipstick from her styrofoam cup against my lips. So I thought I could latch on to the small waste of happiness and follow it anywhere. But pursuing happiness is like pursuing a murderer. It has its depressing moments. Well, here's the first poem in the book, which I remember as happening. Literally, it couldn't have happened, but I remember this happening to me. I was visited one night. The moon. One night, the moon came into my room. It must have said something because I sat up startled. Who's there? It's only me, the moon replied. Go back to sleep. I began to rise, but the moon made reassuring gestures, whispering, sleep, sleep, it's okay. I lay back, pretending to sleep with the sheet over my face, but I left a little opening so I could keep an eye on the moon as it perused my room. Quietly, it pulled open drawers, examined pictures, touched the clothes that were thrown over a chair, read the titles of books stacked on the bureau. Finally, I got tired of watching the moon and went back to sleep. Then I dreamed that the moon came into my room and I sat up. "Weren't you here just a moment ago?" I asked the moon. "Shush," said the moon. "Go back to sleep. You're dreaming." I kind of skipped high school, and I skipped undergraduate school. I went straight to graduate school much later. So I didn't have much, but I did take a few classes once, in undergraduate classes. And we were supposed to write an essay on the Holocaust. But I started reading Moby Dick, and I got totally just blown over, just totally immersed in Moby Dick. And I wrote a paper on it instead. And I got the grade, and my grade said, "Brilliant, beautiful, F." And so I thought later, recent couple of years ago, I thought, what if I could combine those two things? It's called Under a Black Flag. In my Moby Dick, Captain Ahab is Hitler. That's why he stomps around dragging his peg leg, muttering about those Jews, gypsies, mongrel intellectuals, communists, homosexuals, and decadent artists. They all coalesce into the image of that cursed whale, cursed albino with the black blood, milk of emptiness. And the Pequod is Western civilization, following the white whale through an existential darkness, a world made lonely from the death of God. Hitler, poor Hitler, can't find any Aryans to join his crew, so he settles for American Indians, blacks, and Ishmael, whom he suspects might be an Arab. Me, I'm in the book too, Pepito, the cabin boy. Being illegal, I have to sleep down in the hole with the rats and the ballast of graveyard dirt. And I sleep well, rocked by creaking timbers and herds of whales singing ghostly ululations of Ahab's death song. But my Moby Dick is in a kind of eternal present. That's why Nathaniel Hawthorne leans towards Herman Melville as they bounce along in a horse-drawn carriage and tells him about the article he read in the Gazette, a white whale often seen off the island of Mocha that the sailors call Mocha Dick. A white whale festooned with lances, ropes, harpoons, a whale that can flip a longbow, turn on the ship, and sink that too. Melville is taking notes, thinking, Mocha, we'll have to make up some other name for the whale. Simultaneously, the Pequod is going down. Moby Dick, a.k.a. Jehovah, a.k.a. Yahweh, and other mistranslations for that emptiness that cannot be named, swims off, his frothy wake white as a bride's veil. Hitler shimmies up the mast, not to save himself, but just to try and grab one last Jewish angel out of the sky. Epilogue. The sea is quiet and rolls on as it had 1,000 years ago. Hitler drags his leg across the deck. But you can't see him because we have all become transparent and our ship is made of glass. We sail under a black flag with allegiance to the dark matter of the universe. Hitler is at the helm. He has set our course for the furthest archipelagos of the Milky Way. Originally, I tried to get my professor in there too. That didn't quite work. So let's see what I got here. My writing poetry is, I have real nice offices. I share one with my wife, and I have an office in the back of the house in a tent in a bamboo grove. But I actually do most of my writing when I'm teaching. Just when I teach, I give exercises, and then I do them. And so I've actually written most of these books when I was in a classroom. And I also advise my students to steal, so I might steal from them, you know. And so this was an exercise I did with my students, and what I did is I brought in paint chips. You know, paint chips, if it's a good company, they have these wonderful names, you know. And so then they have a color, so I got them to write a poem about the color and the name of the paint chip, and just kind of roll with that. And this color, my paint chip is called Ashes of Roses. She wanted ashes of roses for our bedroom walls, but I thought that was like Dentine chewing gum. No, she said, ashes of roses. I thought it was goodbye, not roses, but the dusty residue of incinerated roses. How about Barbizon, I said. How about a tall yellow butterscotch coupe at the Balmoral Hotel in Edinburgh? Now that's something you could dive into and come up with a mouthful of feathers, all aflutter. No, she said, ashes of roses. You know, the clinking of a tea set on a Mexican veranda. I thought, more like a window in a pink stucco house, several ventriloquist dummies sitting in a pile on the sill, some with smiling faces pressed against the glass. No, silly, more like a piano with the hammers wrapped up in chamois napkins so they barely make a sound. You mean like when the gamekeepers make their rounds in the park at 3 in the morning with silencers on their sidearms and the high fog over the city has a sickly pink glow? Ashes of roses, not Mysteria or Hawksbill, Sachet or Monet Lake. I thought of the way I could still see her against my eyelids when I closed my eyes. I found myself in the garden of pewter roses. I thought of All Fall Down. I thought of roses made of silvery ashes, roses so beautiful that I was afraid to even consider breathing. Here's another exercise I do. Do you guys know the poem Oatmeal by Galway Canal? How many know that poem? Look it up on the web. It's called Oatmeal, and it's by Galway Canal, and it's about eating oatmeal with John Keats. And so I have an assignment where we do something with a famous person, and we put famous people on little slips of paper, and then we put activities like darning your socks, smoking pot, you know, and then make a random pick, a famous person and an activity. So my activity was playing pool with John Coltrane. It's called So What? John Coltrane strode into Milton's all-night billiards carrying his old Pule cue in a black leather case, like it was his saxophone. Man, aren't you dead, I said. Rock 'em up, he said. He broke like the original big band, and the triangle balls exploded across the table, each flying into the pockets in numerical sequence, except for the 8-ball, which remained right where it had been all along. It's going to be a long night, I said. How do I look, boys, he said, dead or alive? He shot all night, and nobody who played him got a turn. Toward dawn, he traded his cue for a broom and shot with that, one-handed, behind his back, over his shoulder. The old guys in the chairs along the back wall, who we called the banks, ran out of money and weren't taking any more bets. So what if he was dead, or if he used a mop or a straw for a cue, or shot blindfolded? Meanwhile, John told stories as he shot. That cannonball, he said, just hated to play all blues. Used to go to the head and stay when it was time for that one. Me and Miles would have to go back there, twist his arms behind his back, and drag him up to the stage. John, I ventured, still playing your sax? That's a fool question, he said, zipping up his pool case and starting out the swinging doors, his broad shoulders pushing them aside with a certain authority. He was backlit for a moment, then disappeared into the gray haze that passes for dawn in this part of town. I was actually in a small club, and I saw Cannibal Adderley and John Coltrane and Miles, and Cannibal didn't want to play all blues. And so he went to the bathroom, and they went in and grabbed him and brought him back with his arms behind his back. You don't usually think of Miles Davis fooling around, but he did. I encourage my students to steal, so I try to set a good example. This is called Richard Garcia Steals a Poem. Sometimes you see a dog running across the freeway. Perhaps he has fallen out of a truck. Patches of his fur are scraped raw. His eyes are wild, saliva drips from his jaws. But look closer. It is not a dog. It is Richard Garcia. Soggy particles dribble from his mouth. You think he has stolen someone's sandwich, but it is not a sandwich. It is another poet's poem, and Richard Garcia has swallowed it. You think you see Richard Garcia strolling through the concourse at the airport, suitcase suspiciously light, but he is not there. He has slipped into the women's bathroom, where he runs alongside closed stalls, reaching over the tops of doors, removing purses that dangle innocently on the hooks. If the bathroom is empty, he will steal the toilet paper. It was Richard Garcia who once said to his students, never fly downward in a dream. But that is just what you have to do to reach the museum of Richard Garcia, experiencing a kind of gray out as you pass through several floors and ceilings, and then brown and then black as you drift down, observing the smashed wine glasses, broken plates, twisted picture frames, and unreturned library books embedded in geographical layers of earth as you descend the well of Richard Garcia and arrive at last in a dark hallway illuminated only by dioramas of history and prehistory, each containing a version of Richard Garcia. There he is as a teenager clinging to the rear of a streetcar in the 1950s and screwing the taillights. There he is at home among saber-toothed tigers and woolly mammoths, squat, bow-legged, beetle-browed, dragging a huge club along the ground. But it is not a club. It is his college diploma. His eye is on the workman's stepladder open beneath a painted cloud. He does not even know that he stole the painted cloud from one of his own poems. He'll steal the stepladder too. He will fold it up and tuck it under his arm, not even noticing that it is not a stepladder, but a primordial emblem of the letter A. So some of the things that sound kind of made up are actually kind of real. Like I went to Warren Wilson in graduate school, and when you graduate, one of the things they do is they give you a stick. They like to say, give us 20,000, we'll give you a stick. And for some reason, each stick is chosen, it's carved, for the person, and they gave me this like caveman club. And I lived in Los Angeles at the time, and sometimes if I heard a noise in the night, I'd get out of bed and get my club and walk around with it, and I'm thinking, this is my college diploma. Memory. After I was born, I was placed in a glass suitcase. At least that is the first thing I remember. The suitcase was placed in an apple orchard. It was night and I was cold. But a lady brought me a blanket and stuffed it in with me, along with some bunched up newspapers. Later she came back and introduced me to my father. He was the rising moon, but was stuck in the tree branches. My sisters were twins who looked so much alike, even they were unsure of who was who. I don't recall their names. I read in the newspaper that my brothers were away at war. We moved to a house. My mother and sister sat in the living room. They seemed to know a secret, something wonderful in the closet, but no one spoke about it. Inside the closet, there were many small shoes, piles and piles of small shoes. While rummaging through the shoes, I found a tiny yellow skull. But that was long ago. Now I wake and write in my journal. 8 a.m. I just woke up. A nice lady brings me coffee. 8:03. I just woke up. A nice lady brings me coffee. She says she is my wife. I like her. 8:05. Oh, this was an exercise that I did with my students. I call it a keyboard exercise. So you look at the things on the keyboard, the letters and the numbers and the signs, and you use them as metaphors and similes to write your poem. You see your poem through them. It's called a letter, a number, some punctuation. A. In the beginning there was a ladder. No, two people leaning against each other, their foreheads touching, Between them, a book of instructions. 12. 12 reasons not to look his wife of 12 years in the eye. She sat up straight, staring into the future. He was bent over his plate. Parenthesis. One half of a parenthesis when she asked, "Is there someone else?" The couple next to them stopped talking, put down their silver, and waited. Even the mariachi stopped mid-kukuru. Ampersand. What is between a flower and a knife? A candle. A candle is between a flower and a knife. Parenthesis. Just what he was missing, a moment between moments, part of something but not. Stanza break, diversion, trying to cup a small flame between his hands. Period. They say the universe began with something as small as this. When something ends, but you hardly notice. Looking back, he can't remember when it stopped or why. Oh, well, here's another exercise to do with my students. There's a wonderful exercise you can look up. It's called the 20 Projects. And you're supposed to do 20 different things. Like you start out with a metaphor, and then you're supposed to say something, and reverse it, and you're supposed to use a nickname, things people call you. This is called My Grandmother's Laughter. My grandmother's laughter was an exploding plate, the kind that the traveling salesman said would never break, and he'd fling it against the kitchen floor just to prove his point. And the plate would spin, making a kind of high-pitched whine. My grandmother's laughter was like that too, almost soundless, like it was running out of breath. The stillness astonished at itself, the quiet eye of a hurricane. My grandmother's hands fluttered like pigeons on the window ledge when I was falling asleep. Her eyes were the color of accordion music. She listened to Sergeant Preston of the Yukon, read over and over Anne of Green Gables, and Tarzan, King of the Jungle. I never saw her picture staring at me from the mantel. "Are you my grandmother?" I would ask her. "Sure, kid," she'd mumble, a cigar clenched between her teeth. And then she'd hoist her shotgun up and blast another of those unbreakable Melmac plates that I would throw up into the air, into smithereens. "Fuchi, that stinks," she would say when she stuck her head in the kitchen where my mother was cooking menudo. Well, I failed. Because she always told the truth, her shins never hurt. She told me she could ask a question of her special spirit, and an image of the answer would appear in a bubble of light. She said that President Truman was in a stupid son of a bitchy. My grandmother only read newspapers of the future. Sometimes she made me so happy, I had nightmares to compensate. She would walk into my dreams and sell me magazine subscriptions, me, known as El Diablo, the one who spits in the mirror, who cried in the womb, who fathered his own grandmother, he of the silent fire escapes and Resnick closet desk. Looking up from the Ouija board, she leaned over and whispered in my ear, "You will have no descendants and be a disgrace to your many grandchildren." "Ani rotse uga," I answered, not knowing that I had just asked for cake in the language of Jesus. Only I could break the unbreakable plates without a shotgun. That is why the plate spoke to me. "You will never have a grandmother," they said. "It's true," my grandmother added, blasting another plate out of the sky. It was blue, and pieces of it rained down on me, like pieces of an angel, some beautiful, goddamn angel, shot out of the sky. Actually, I don't know the slightest thing about my grandmother. Just a few more poems. Since you mentioned not bad for a hermaphrodite, I'll read that one. This was an exercise too. It's a sestina, and what I do when I get kids to write sestina, I say, I will write a sestina. If this, you know what sestina is, right? It's got 6 words that have to concur in a pattern, and outright a sestina on any 6 words that you give me. So they shouted out, transmission, disemboweled, hermaphrodite, anagram, quadriplegic, and goth. Not bad for hermaphrodite. The poem was scrambled during transmission. Previously, it had been tied to a gate and disemboweled. Some said it was a hermaphrodite whose secret name was suspected of being an anagram of a supernatural being, a quadriplegic god fond of anyone who dressed goth. The poem could sing the entire libretto of Faust and goth. It could hum like a Cherry V8 transmission in a loaded 56 Chevy. It was, however, quadriplegic. And 4 of its stanzas were immobile, disemboweled, and deveined. It had chutzpah and a gram of old-fashioned moxie. Not bad for hermaphrodite. In fact, it was titled Not Bad for Hermaphrodite. In days of old, it was chanted by drunken goths who thought its power was that it was an anagram of something really important but lost in transmission. The true truth of the universe, unfortunately disemboweled, disheveled, and discarded on the road like a quadriplegic marauder who couldn't admit he was quadriplegic. Why was the poem hermaphrodite? Because it was male and female, disemboweled, held up by exterior struts of language like a Gothic cathedral, for it needed no vowels. It was just pure transmission, and it was one word of infinite license plate anagram. Or was it one word of an orgasmic anagram? The poet was fabled as a great lover, although quadriplegic. The attention of his tongue, it was said, was direct transmission to goddesshood, pleasures beyond what contortionist hermaphrodites strapped to vibrating washing machines during spin cycle by soapy goths could ever know, even if all inhibitions were disemboweled. The poem would survive even disemboweled, for an alphabet of leaves flashing in wind was its anagram. It could be stomped on by barbarian savages, goths. It could sit upright in a blunt, oiled steak, be squashed by quadriplegic elephants, and never recited by eunuchs or hermaphrodites at weddings in India, although invisible, its apogee was transmission. Let it lie disemboweled in a vacant lot like a quadriplegic Cadillac, its anagram garbled by poetically correct hermaphrodites. The poem outlives deconstructing goths and its own transmission. So I'll read you 2 more poems, I think. I'll do 3. This is a little tiny short one. I just wrote this recently. It's a prose poem. It's called Sappho. Greek poet Sappho. Sappho talks in her sleep. She's dreaming of Egypt. She's dreaming of bandages. She says, angels look like normal people. Together we step inside a bubble. It takes us under the Aegean Sea. It's supposed to be the backyard behind the house where I grew up. Sappho and I are 3rd graders home from school. We are wrestling on the grass together. She's wearing a plaid cowboy shirt. Sappho sits on my chest. Outlined against the sky, she reminds me of Dale Evans. I would tell her she looks like Dale Evans. This may be my first attempt at poetry. Sappho laughs and bounces on my chest. My words are small bubbles that rise into the sky. Well, I have a dog named Louie. Louie has had many adventures. Did you ever have a pet, like a dog or a cat, and feel that your pet was concerned about you when you were in like a bad year, like you're depressed or something, and your pet kind of follows you around and going, ooh. And it's like they kind of pick up on your mood? Well, Louie does that sometimes. You know? So this is called Louie, MD, PhD. There was a dog that was a psychiatrist who wanted to analyze his master. He was aware of the ethical and professional problems that analyzing his master could create. Regardless, because his master seemed depressed, he decided to proceed. He would sit by his master's side and wait for him to speak. But all his master ever said to him was, sit, come, or stay. The dog suspected that his master was fixated on these 3 words. Later he wrote in his notebook, "I believe that the patient was forced to remain in the closet for long periods of time during his childhood, preparing him for the development of his language skills." The dog that was a psychiatrist waited for his master to lie on the couch and talk about his childhood. But his master never lay on the couch. It was as if the dog thought his master was afraid of falling asleep. So the dog would lie on the couch in comfortable-looking positions of ease. He would stretch out, close his eyes, and sigh with pleasure. He would lie upside down with his paws in the air. He would make movements with his legs to indicate he was having a pleasant squirrel-chasing dream. He hoped that by following this example, his master would lose his fear of sleep. But all his master did was stand there offering him a milk bone. Milk, the dog later wrote in his notebook, perhaps a reference to his mother's breast. Bone, he wrote, perhaps he is overcome with his fear of death. The dog, who was a psychiatrist, sat in his office late into the night. He was concerned about how little progress his master was making in therapy. He stared at his notes, raised one ear, cocked his head to one side, chewed on his pencil. Now we'll finish with another dog poem, partly inspired by Louis. Louis has a little white tip on his tail. I did some research for this poem. You know, some anthropologists think that we learn to hunt by observing the actions of dogs, learning how they're, watching how they hunted, and so we copy them. And I also did some research in ancient texts in this poem, and so it has 4 Hebrew words in it. Kelef means dog, Rishon means first, Halom means dream, and Sefer means book. And I'll finish with this poem. And I want to thank you for having me here at Barry. And it's just a beautiful campus. If I was a student here, I wouldn't want to graduate. Adam and Eve's dog. Not many people know it, but Adam and Eve had a dog. Its name was Kelef Rishon, which means first dog. Some scholars say it had green fur and ate only plants and grasses. And that is why some dogs still like to eat grass. Some say it had pink skin, like the Mexican hairless dog. Others say it was male, some female, or that it was androgynous, like the angels or the present-day hyena. Rabbi Perez, a medieval Kabbalist in Barcelona, thought it was a black dog, and that it could see the angels, which were everywhere in the garden, although Adam and Eve could not see them. He writes in his book of mystical dream meditations, Sefer Halom, that Kelef tried to help Adam and Eve see the angels by pointing at them with his nose, aligning its tail in a straight line with its back, and raising one paw. But Adam and Eve thought Kelef was pointing at the birds. All scholars agree that it had a white tip on its tail and that it was a small dog. Sometimes you see paintings of Eve standing next to a tree holding an apple. The misinterpretation of this iconography gave birth to the legend of the forbidden fruit and the fall from grace. Actually, it was not an apple, but Kelef's ball, and Eve was about to throw it. One day, although there were no days or nights as we know them, she threw the ball right out of the garden. Kelef ran after it and did not return. Adam and Eve missed their dog, but were afraid to leave the garden. It was misty and dark outside the garden. They could hear Kelef barking, always farther and farther away, its bark echoing as if there were 2 dogs barking. Finally, they could stand it no longer, and they gathered Kelef's bed of large leaves and exited the garden. They were holding the leaves in front of their bodies. Although they could not see it, an angel followed, trying to light up the way with a flaming sword. And the earth was without form outside the garden. Everything was gray and without shape or outline, because nothing outside the garden had a name. Slowly they advanced toward the sound of barking, holding each other, holding their dog's bed against their bodies. Eventually they made out something small and white, swinging from side to side. It seemed to be leading them through the mist into a world that was becoming more visible. Now there were trees, and beneath their feet there was a path. Thank you. Feel free, it's fun to talk about poetry. You want to know how to be rich and famous writing poetry, or meaning of life? Don't ask me that. Or how do you publish a poem, or what else could you ask me? Did that really happen? Did you really escape from jail? Yeah. So, who does what else? I'm trying to think of questions to ask me. Well, I talked a lot too about dreaming, because some of my poems come from dreams, and I talked about dreaming today in class, and talked about prose poetry, and process, you know, how do you write your poems, or anything. Yeah.
Do you try and write every day, or do you only write when you're feeling really inspired?
My ideal is to write every day, but I haven't really been too good at it. I have a student who swore that she was going to write every day for a year, and she did. And the thing about writing, any kind of creative writing, is that something happens when you write consistently. You'll write some real piece of garbage, and then another piece of garbage, and then another, and on the fourth day, they all come together somehow. You know, and it's really magical. And I'm trying to get back there. Part of my problem is that I don't have to be anywhere except 3 times a year. And so, I don't know, getting lazy, or I just need some discipline or something. But really, the best thing is daily writing. I highly recommend it for myself and everybody, because magical things happen through the consistency of writing. And you know, when you first start writing poetry too, you get, oh, I'm inspired, you know, and write it down, you know. But gradually, that kind of, you sort of mature from that, out of that, and that inspiration comes. It comes from the work. It's just as inspiring. I even had to learn to control it, because I didn't like writing poems in a fever, you know. Writing a 6-stanza poem in an elevator, you know, going 6 floors, you know. And but you learn how to get that inspiration from the consistent work. And then there's another level, which is the rewriting and the reworking, and that's another kind of different kind of inspiration. It's kind of a high, too, in a way. When you write a poem, it's like, that's why, you know, I tell my students never send a poem to a publisher the day you print it, because you will always be signed. You can count on that. Because you just have this glow, you know, and it's just like, oh man, then, you know, it's just, yeah. Do you write poetry? Yeah, well, yeah, it's every day, really. I mean, I should talk. I'm not doing it myself, you know, but every day is the way to do it. You know, also, you can, what I do is, it's not like you're a novelist. You novelists, you know, you're going to have to be in there all day, all night, you know. You're not going to see your wife and kids, you know. But the poet, you know, you just 15 minutes, right, you know. Your work's done. Oh, okay, got that done, you know. Yeah. I mean, I really admire what novelists do, but I know that novelists have written some very bad poems, so I know it's a different skill.
Do you have any major influences for your writing? Any people?
I think the Spanish poets, Luis Cernuda and Garcia Lorca. Didn't you tell me your dog was named Duende? Yeah, and Pablo Neruda, and Pablo Paz. And that's partly a cultural influence, because magical realism is really more cultural to me. You grow up with it, I grew up in a house where things might disappear, or we found out what our dreams were every morning, or there were ghosts, or you might see something that wasn't possible, or somebody would tell you you could die, and you would die, you know. So magical realism is more of a cultural phenomenon to me. But also, you know, there's so many great poets writing right now. These graduate schools are just turning around, you know. And it's good. It's good. There's so many wonderful writers. And I like music. And one of the influences in this book is there's a whole section of poems about music. I think music inspires everybody, but since music is abstract, you don't know how it inspires you. You just know, wow, you know, I want to do that somehow. And I don't play an instrument, so I'll just try to do it this way. Oh, that counts. You raise your hand aside. Let's see. Maybe I could give you an answer, and you give me the question. Well, here's one I brought up at dinner. I'll give you the answer, give me the question. Ice cream, is that what I said? Pistachio ice cream. What's the question?
What kind of ice cream is green?
That's a good one. No, the question is, what can I eat that will give me wonderful dreams? Pistachio ice cream. Try it. Tell me. At night. Yeah.
Next time I'm a paper.
Huh?
Next time I'm a paper, pistachio ice cream.
Pistachio ice cream. Yeah. And I was also telling them how to write in your sleep, how to lucid dream, and how to go into a trance. Useful things, you know. Academic. So, what were some of your favorite poets?
You.
Oh, hey. Smart man. Yeah, this is my father here on the right side, holding the gun. It's a really old picture. And the flying Garcia, which I don't have here, has a picture of my brother in World War II. You saw the references to the war and stuff. See, I didn't see I was a child of the 40s, so I had two brothers who were 20 years older, so they were in the war. I was a kid, and I knew I had brothers, but I'd never seen them. And I used to look at the wall before I fell asleep, and I would see the war in shadows. And then just before I fell asleep, this character, who I call the shadow captain, and he looked like a captain with a captain's uniform. It was a shadow. And he would come and like salute me. And then one morning I woke up and my brother was standing there. And that's what the reference to that is. And the picture of my brother on the book is really handsome. Women ask me about it, but he's 80, you know.
How old are they?
I don't know, 20. Yeah. So, any other questions?
Colin, I like how you're referencing this about your dog. It's totally relatable. Like, I felt like you talked about my dog. So, like,
Yeah.
I wrote that poem.
Yeah, well, actually, a poet, your publisher, you know, when I saw him read, I think it's just a shtick, you know. He says, you can't write poems about dogs. Come on. You know, and there's a whole book of poems about dogs. Poems written from the standpoint of the dogs. The poets are supposed to write from the standpoint of their dogs. There's a whole book of that. Mark Doty has a wonderful sonnet in which the dog kind of has this soliloquy as he's walking the dog. And the dog says, at one point he says, you know, he's complaining about him, you know, how he's brooding and thinking about, you know, and he says, the past, is that what you call it? You know? And then it ends with the line, bow wow, bow wow, bow wow. Now technically that's not iambic, but yeah, dogs are wonderful companions, and I love their spirits, and they're people to me. Yeah, I had a dog that could talk a little bit. You know, because I had him, he would always do what I said, you know. So he was an old dog. I acquired him with this house I rented. And I would like tell him to go get the other dog and he'd do it. So I thought, he can talk, you know, or I understand. And then one day I was standing in the yard and I looked down at him and I said, Scotty, do you think if I wanted to talk to dogs, I should learn dog language? And he looked up at me and he said, just like that. I mean, that's in the dictionary. Yeah, dogs are, they're like our spiritual companions. And I think one of the points in my Adam and Eve poem is that when we leave the garden, we leave part of our animal nature and we go onto a new level, okay? And the dog, as a creature, has left part of its animal nature behind by aligning itself with us. Like a cat, for instance, you know, cats are still wild. When you see a cat out there in the grass and you see its eyes and its tongue, it's still wild to some extent. But the dog has acquired some different consciousness because of his relation to us. So I'm thinking in the poem, maybe he was the one who led us out, you know, into consciousness. I mean, and that's not so far-fetched that people think that they're the ones who taught us how to hunt. So that's really not so far-fetched. And in the Egyptian Book of the Dead, when they weigh your soul, they're going to talk to your pets, see what they have to say about you. You know? And that's going to go into the weighing. You know? So it's really not so far-fetched. But if you look at the poems of James Tate, you don't realize how many poems of James Tate end with an animal staring at you. Well, I had a dog that could read, but that's nice. Well, thank you very much.